I've had a bit of a cold, so I might have to break off to have a coughing fit, but I trust you'll bear with me in that. Now, you've no doubt have seen this already. The character I'm looking at. Derek was saying about how he fought, and I was going to say, can you use the word wrestling instead? And of course, John's just been talking about wrestling, how he's wrestling with this thing, and we all wrestle. It's something we all do, all through our lives. Like we wrestle for this and that and the other. And so I'm going to talk mostly today about wrestling. And let's just pray. Lord, I thank you that you're here. Holy Spirit, you're so welcome. And we ask you to be our teacher this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. Right, the origins of Israel have various eras. And the first era was the patriarchs. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Moses was sort of a go-between between the two eras. And so we're looking at this significant role in the formation of Israel as being of the patriarchs. We're looking at Jacob. And as I say, there's a lot of mention about wrestling. I don't know if anybody here, maybe Kim, maybe Ruth, I don't know about Derek, might remember Eric Adams. Oh, yeah. Eric Adams was a pastor here in the 60s, and he was formerly a coal miner and a professional wrestler. And who remembers Mick McManus? I mentioned Mick McManus to him one day, and he goes, "Poof, an actor. No problem. He's not a real wrestler." I saw Eric Adams break with his bare hands a 6-inch nail. He broke it in half with his bare hands. Now, he was strong. And he used to tell us tales about what it was like in the mines and so on. He was a wrestler. And Jacob was a wrestler. He was a wrestler from the very beginning. Now, if I'd been to Bible college, they might have told me that my talks or sermons, as they might more grandly call them, must have 3 points. Well, I'm not having points. What I'm doing is I'm having rounds. So, there we go. So, you might remember from your Bible about the birth of Jacob. Isaac and Rebekah didn't have any children. And Abraham, Isaac's father, had this great promise that they were going to fill the earth, there were going to be millions, there were going to be a great nation, and so on. And there's no sign of it. There's only Isaac and Rebekah's not having children. So in Genesis 25, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife, since she was unable to conceive children. And the Lord responded to him. His wife Rebekah became pregnant. But when the infants kept on wrestling each other inside her womb, she asked herself, "Why is this happening?" So she asked the Lord for an explanation. Now, to those of you who have been pregnant, you understand that babies move in the womb. Now, even I understand this, so I'm sure Rebekah understood this. So for her to ask God, it must have been an extraordinary wrestling match going on inside her. It can't have just been an ordinary movement of a baby kicking, as we say. And she said, "Why is this happening?" So she asked the Lord for an explanation. And this is where the destiny part comes in. This destiny of being this great nation, this great people that God had told Abraham. And he said, God's reply was, "2 nations are in your womb," the Lord responded, "and 2 separate people will emerge. one people will be stronger and the older one will serve the younger. Now, you may be familiar with that. So the twins were born. Esau, of course, came out first, the older. And it's recorded that Jacob was hanging on to his heel. So he was named heel grabber or supplanter because he hung on to his brother's heel. So he's wrestling from the very beginning, fighting for everything. And now verse 28 tells us that Isaac loved and favoured Esau because he enjoyed eating his gain. But Rebekah loved and favoured Jacob. And you've got to ask, did Isaac love Jacob? Well, maybe he did, but he seemed unable to connect to Jacob like he connected to Esau. Esau would go out onto the North York Miles and catch a pheasant or a grouse or whatever, or into the woods and catch a hare, and Isaac liked his game. And so there was a connection there. And Jacob apparently stayed at home and did stuff around the tents at home. He didn't go hunting. Now, there's an important issue here, and that is that Jacob would recognise that he was not loved. And this is important because there are loads of people who have not felt the love of a parent. I mean, it's said that 85% of single parents in the UK are women. And so the children of those 85% single parents don't have a father figure, or maybe that father figure changes all the time. And this has an effect on people. It has an impact. And this feeling of not being loved had an impact on Jacob. And it can mess people up really bad, can this? And it will leave a mark. And Jacob was one of these people. And if you listen to this and you experience this, God is able to bring you healing in this. And in the process, you may also feel the love of God more than you have done previously. God is able. Look to God. Now, as I said, Isaac is one of the patriarchs, and the next one is going to be the next patriarch. And God has said the older will serve the younger. And Isaac seems to be ignoring this. But we'll come to that in a bit. But first of all, the inheritance of being a patriarch had two parts. And there was the birthright and the blessing. And we can read in chapter 27, verse 41 over there, that we're reading that Esau came back from a day hunting, and he was famished, starving, and he gets back, and Jacob is preparing some lentil soup, and Esau said, "That smells great." Now, I've got to tell you, lentil soup doesn't have the same effect on me. But maybe there was something else in it. Anyway, Jacob says, "You can have some if you give me your birthright." And Esau says, "What good is a birthright if I'm already dead?" You know, this must be the greatest example of short-sightedness in the Bible. Ding, don't see, smell soup, don't see birthright. and he gives it away for a bowl of soup. And you think, you know, what a plonker. Anyway, Jacob had effectively got stolen his birthright. And the custom was the eldest son would get the birthright. Isaac already favoured Esau and would later on want to give him the birthright. But Jacob had stuck it. Now, Jacob knew that the birthright was going to be his. And he said, that's mine. But he didn't wait for God to do it. He did it by trickery and wrestling, because he was always a wrestler. And in life, we often see that people get things that maybe think we should have. That should be mine. This happens in this situation here, it's happening. It might happen at work, somebody gets a promotion at school, somebody gets a better mark and you don't think they've really earned it. This happens to us all. This is something we all encounter. And somebody might get the credit, you know. I've seen it, some fellas talking at work, oh, the trouble with this job is this, that and the other. And one of them goes to the boss and says, I've just had this marvellous idea, and takes this idea out of this conversation. And then the other person finds out that this great idea has come, and he realises from that conversation that the person has stolen his credits, the credit he should have had. There's loads of situations you can think about where this happens, where you think that should be mine. I should have had that promotion. I should have had that credit. I should have had that whatever. And this is what happens when we do these things. Because, like I say, God had said to Jacob that the elder would serve the younger. Said to Rebekah, which Jacob knew. And instead of waiting for God to do it, he did this. He chased the right thing the wrong way. He didn't wait for God to do it, and he gets it. And then, of course, later in the story, I'm sure most of us are familiar with this story of Isaac says to us, Esau, go and catch a deer, fancy some venison, and then I'll give you the blessing. So this is the second part of the inheritance for the next patriarch. And Rebekah hears this, so they have this cunning plan, and unlike Baldric, his cunning plan actually works, and they get Jacob to smell like Esau, to feel like Esau, and Jacob no doubt copies his voice, he's a twin after all, and they con Isaac into giving Jacob the blessing. So Jacob now has the birthright and the blessing to be the next patriarch. All things which God was going to do anyway, but he couldn't wait. He worked it out and connived and got it. But there are consequences for this. You can't get away with it. And like I said in 27:41, Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Meaning, he's going on. He'll soon be out of the way, he'll soon be dead. The days of mourning for my father are at hand, then I will kill my brother Jacob. He's going to take him out. And this is the consequence when you connive and cheat. This is just what happens. And I mean, I would say that I would think we've all seen this happen in our lives, where people have got what they really should have had, but they've got it by the wrong means. Anyway, somebody comes and tells Rebecca this. So she says to Jacob, "You've got to get out of here. You've got to go. Now there's your uncle Laban. You need to go to him." Pardon me. And you need to go quickly because Esau's going to kill you. And so Jacob asks God, "Now what does every wrestler have? What was Giant Haystack's a Big Daddy? He was his nemesis." And Jacob was about to meet his nemesis. So off he goes. Now, this is a map of Abraham going to the Promised Land. And he goes first to Haran and then to the Promised Land. Now, Laban is in Haran. And so now the promise of God is going backwards, as it were. I couldn't find a map of Jacob to Haran that was any good. So I've had to use this one of Abraham. But it still illustrates clearly that the promise of God appears to be going backwards. Away from the Promised Land, back to where they came from. And he arrives there, and it says now Laban had to have two daughters. The older one was named Leah and the younger one named Rachel. So there they are. This is an artist's impression of what they look like. It's not actually, nobody was there and drew this. It could even be an AI, nowadays it could even be an AI representation, I don't know. It's just a picture I found in the great internet place. And it says that Jacob loved Rachel. So he made a pact with her dad that he would work for 7 years for the hand of Rachel, your younger daughter. Now, is anybody romantic here? So we're going to go into a bit of romance now. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, but it seemed only like a few days because of his love for her. Oh, you don't seem too excited about that. Anyway, so that's a nice, sweet verse for you to remember. So nice, so nice. Anyway, eventually the wedding arrives. Big do, and I mean, I suspect you know what's going to happen next. So the wedding day arrived, there's feasting, there's celebration, and there was probably wine involved. And the wedding night arrives, and next morning, in one of the versions says, next morning there was Leah. It said in one of the versions. And Jacob was not happy about this. He didn't think this was quite a good idea. He'd worked 7 years for Rachel, and instead he gets Leah. And Laban says, well, that's the way we do things around here. You don't marry the younger daughter before the older daughter. And you're getting them married. It reminded me of a stately home we went to in Northumbria, I think it was. And the guide was showing us all these names scratched into a window pane. And this apparently was where all the babies were born, or perhaps a nursery. And all the boys' names had dates and the girls didn't have dates against them. And apparently this was because these aristocrats believed in the same thing, that you marry the older daughter off first and work down the family. And so they didn't put the dates on, so if a younger daughter got married, then it wouldn't show up. So obviously that it was the younger daughter getting married first. And I believe this was the same in the Bronte family for the moves, from what I've heard about that. Anyway, Jacob wakes up and there's Leah. There'd been all this celebration, and like there wasn't electricity then. This may be a surprise to you, I don't know. And it's just not the same. And of course, she may even have been wearing a veil. Either way, and either way, he's got the wrong bride, and he complains to Laban. Why did you deceive me? Why did you deceive me? And interestingly, he's been a deceiver, and now he's been deceived. And this is why, of course, Laban was his nemesis. And again, just leave the Bible story for a while, and imagine what it'd be like to be Leah. That, you know, your dad tells you to do this, you do what he's told, and you know Jacob's interested in your sister, not you. What would it be like for her? And I'm sure we know, as the heartache of broken marriages and how people feel unloved when the marriage is broken down and betrayed and all that. And Leah has got more than this, I think. And here she is, just and an extra dimension to this is that Jacob already knew what it was like to be unloved, but, you know, this was something that he had experienced. So you would think that, you know, I wouldn't treat anybody, I was treated like that, I won't treat anybody like that. But no, he doesn't love her. She has to keep her as his wife, but he doesn't love her. And this is an aspect of where damaged people often pass the damage on. And it's a great example of that. That instead of realising this happened to me, I won't do this to anybody else, instead he's doing the same to Leah as what happened to him. And he wasn't loved, now Leah isn't loved. And it's a great lesson to us in life that this is so often, and God saw that she wasn't loved. And of course, the culture at the time is very important. It was most important to have sons. And God gave Leah a son. And Jacob would want that, definitely. And even this was not just important then, of course. We know from our own history how important it is to have a son when we think of Henry VIII. And we could say, well, in one thing in Jacob's favour, he didn't chop Leah's head off. But that's not a great deal to say, really, because it was a different culture and he had other options, as we'll see later. So we get a sense of Leah's pain in the names she chooses for her sons. Reuben. Surely my husband will love me now. She's not loved, she has a son. Her son's wanted, surely he'll love me now. It doesn't happen. So then she has another son, Simeon. And his name's Simeon, because the Lord has said, I am not loved. Things don't change. Another son, Levi. Now my husband will become attached to me. None of it didn't happen. But these names really show the depth of Leah's pain in this situation. And it's always the same. If you don't address the brokenness in your life, it affects the people around you. And in this case, Jacob was broken and unloved, and his feeling of being unloved affected those nearest to him. It affected Paul here. And it will be inflicted on those around you. And this makes it so important that if you've been through this and are going through this and dealing with this sort of sense of being unloved, that you deal with it. We must deal with this. We're all wounded in some way. And if we don't deal with it, we will inflict it on those nearest to us. We all need this. Now, as a church, we ought to be able to help each other through these things, dealing with various trials and problems. And we know this happens in this congregation. We do support it one another. And have that support, and I'm sure you will have too. And this is one of the purposes of the church, is to support each other. And that's why you come to church, because if you don't go to church and you haven't got the body around you, you don't get the same support. That's one of the reasons. Anyway, be assured that God sees your pain. The Lord saw that Leah is not loved. And he knew what she was experiencing. He sees your pain too. So she conceived again and bore a son. And this time she chose the name Judah. And this is because the name Judah sounds like the Hebrew word for praise. So that's why she chose this name. And this indicates a massive shift in Leah's attitude to her situation, how she coped with the situation. She now was taking her eyes off getting the love of Jacob, taking her eyes off the issue that was most pressing to her and started to look to God. This is a big lesson to any of us who are going through trials, is to take our eyes off the situation and look to God. It's a tremendous help to us in those situations. By now, you will have probably worked out that Jacob is not the hero in this story. This is the man that God said would be the next patriarch. This is the chosen line, as it were. But before he leaves Haran, he ends up with a family of 4 wives, 11 sons, and a daughter. This is God's chosen family. I would recommend that you read the story of what goes on with all these, how he gets these wives, and what else going on, and you think, this is a right mess. This is dysfunctional family that makes the Simpsons look ideal. I would have had a picture of the Simpsons, but I was a bit unsure about the copyright there. So I didn't have a picture of the Simpsons, but we see dysfunctional families, we maybe experience dysfunction in our lives. But this, what sort of family is this? You know, this is the family God chose. Why? You know, surely he could have found somebody better than that. Anyway, he didn't actually have one of these, but have you seen these ever? On back of minibuses, maybe you've seen these. There's somebody in Brid has one, and I've seen them about where they often have mum and dad and a couple of kids and a dog, and on these minivans. Obviously, with a family that size, you wouldn't get in a van like this size. But and obviously, it hasn't yet been invented better. But that gives you an idea, and you can see Jacob's there. He's pretty big. He's got a big ego, and there's all this mess around him that he's managed to create. And these sons become the heads of the tribes of Israel eventually. And if you read their stories, you think, what? And it just shows how God chooses the unexpected all the time. It's something he always seems to do. The people we think he chooses somebody else. Our man who was here last Sunday evening, when he was talking about how he came to faith. I mean, it's a tremendous story. You should have been here, really. You really missed a good story, and it was well delivered. And the music was good too. And you know, why would God choose somebody like him? I won't go into that because obviously you didn't hear him. But God chooses the most unlikely people to achieve what he wants. So, Leah said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. And Judah, of course, you will have probably know, became the ancestor of King David, and of course, more importantly, later on, Jesus, the Messiah, the great God, by which all nations of the earth are blessed, fulfilling what God originally said to Abraham years back. And it's again, we can, just by looking at this dysfunctional family, we can learn something from it. And we can learn that no matter how confused everything seems, God is able to make good out of it. He doesn't make the bad things good, but he's able to turn things around to make good things come out of this. And this applies in any given situation, no matter how dark things look. Like Leah, we need to turn our eyes from the situation onto Jesus. So can I encourage you to do that? Take your eyes off the news, which just depresses you. Take your eyes off social media, which is just full of rubbish and fantasy and AI-generated stuff and maliciously generated stuff, and put them onto Jesus. This is where your eyes need to be. And so can I encourage you to do that? Because Jesus is the ultimate cycle breaker. And the cycle that Jacob was in, that is reproduced here and continues, apparently for the rest of his life, it would seem, if you continue to read that. Anyway, from that moment, Jacob's still with Laban for a few years more. Him and Laban are constantly trying to rob each other, trying to con each other. They're all the time wrestling, trying to get the best. And Jacob ends up very rich and eventually wears out his welcome and thinks, well, I better clear off. So he waits around shearing time, and while Laban and his sons are shearing, he gathers all his family into this, not into the minivan obviously, but and off they go. And he's going to go back where he came from. So now it last seems that God's plan is at least heading in the right direction. It might be a right mess, this family, but they're going in the right direction. So that's got to be good. And of course, there is one slight problem here, which I'm sure you remember, that Esau's going to kill him. So that is a slight hiccup there to this plan. But anyway, he's going back. And how will the wily heel grabber get out of this one? So anyway, they arrived back, and Jacob decides to feel what the atmosphere is. Try and check out whether he's going to, what Esau's like nowadays. I mean, for all he knows, Esau might have broken his leg and so he can't chase him anymore. Who knows what he's thinking? But he sends out messengers to find out. And he sends his messengers. So, after delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob and reported, "We met your brother Esau, and he's already on his way to meet you, with an army of 400 men." So this, not surprisingly, worried Jacob somewhat, and so he has to come up with another cunning plan. And so he sends gifts to Esau, and he tries all sorts of things, and so he sends the gifts, and then he divides his family into groups and sends them, and he tells them to keep an interval, so between them, all very cunningly worked out. He's still only trying to work the angles, and he hopes that this will work. But this fear of Esau killing him seems to have caused him to do something that we don't read about him doing before in the entire story. He prays. We read that God spoke to him, but we don't read that he actually spoke to God. And even referred to God as the God of my father in the previous parts. If you read that the whole life biography, you'll see that. And he begins to pray. So he says, this is another Christian point. So this is actually round 3. This time he's going to wrestle God. And so he sends the gifts to appease him, and this is what he prays. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and all the truth which you have shown your servants, for I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become 2 companies. So what he's saying there is I left with nothing except my staff, my walking stick, and I've come back with 2 companies. What he's saying is I'm now stinking rich. And he's coming back to it. That's what he's telling God, which God knows anyway. Save me, I pray, from the hands of my brother Esau. For I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mothers with the children. He's still seeing himself first, of course. He sent all them in front, and he stayed on his own back in the camp. And then he's prayed this, and out of that prayer, there are 2 important phrases which we can all learn from. And the first one is, I am not worthy. And the second one is, save me. Now, if you're new to the idea of Christianity, of faith and following Jesus, this is the place where you start. Recognise that you can't help yourself and look to God and call out to Jesus, save me. This is the starting point of faith. And this would appear to be Jacob's starting point. And recognising he's not worthy. Even though he's wrestled everything in his life, everything and everyone he's wrestled, this time he has no answer. So he's looking to God. And if we recognise we're broken people, we don't deserve anything, we're done for. And all we can do is cry to God, save me. Or you can have another highly theological prayer like, help! Or something like that. And God hears. God hears. So he decides he gets sleep, and then tomorrow he'll go and meet his brother. And during the night, it says a man comes and wrestles him. We later discover that this man is actually God wrestling with Jacob. And it's nearly morning, and God was not winning. And he says, let me go. It's nearly daybreak. And Jacob won't let go. He's a wrestler. He fights for what he wants. And he wrestles. And this is obviously ridiculous. Like, God is not beating Jacob. Because he obviously can do it. And the evidence is there because he just reaches out and goes, ding, and out pops his hip. And it's obviously he could have done that hours ago, and instead he wrestled with him all night. But I think is really describing that Jacob would not let go. Now I met a colleague of my brother's called Dave Marshall. He was for Thwing, was Dave, and his nickname was Limpet. And he was a fighter. He was always getting drunk and fighting in pubs. But his name was Limpet because once he got hold of you, you couldn't get out. He had such a strong grip, this Dave. I mean, I met him and he never got a grip of me. But, he was okay, but he was probably sober. So. Anyway, either way, he was, in this respect, Dave Limpet and Jacob were the same. They wouldn't let go. And Jacob, and sometimes when we're wrestling for something, maybe particularly in prayer, that we need not to let go. I mean, the Bible talks about persistent prayer, persevering prayer. And this is what Jacob's doing in a figurative way by wrestling with God. He's not letting go. He's been persistent. He's been persevering. And this is basically what's happening here, rather than the actual wrestling match. And so there we are. Now, when we recognise we can't handle this, whatever trouble it is, and we like I said, we know we all experience trouble. Life can be hard. And when you're wrestling with something in life, you come to a point where you realize you can't handle it. Troubles, illness, addiction maybe, stuff like that you can't handle. Recognise, we know that in addiction, the first thing an addict needs to know is that it's out of their control. As long as they keep saying, I can control this, they don't realise they're addicted. And as soon as they realise they're under addiction, they can then deal with it. And in our situation, we can not only do that, we can look to God and get hold of God and not let go with a determination. So if you are in these situations of life, which will come to us all, and you might be in them for all I know, and we think of Derek and Anne, we should be wrestling for them in the concept of the church, supporting one another. And may I encourage you, and may I stir up myself to wrestle for God. So let's just pray, and that closes it. Heavenly Father, thank